This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. And welcome into episode number 97 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Crazy to think, Nick, we are 3 episodes and change away from triple digits on the show, but the only team that felt like they were on triple digits this weekend in terms of college hockey was the University of North Dakota. Boy, did they have a great weekend, unfortunately, against our St. Cloud State Huskies. We're going to touch, of course, on that, as well as some women's hockey. A really good weekend series. Obviously, not the total results that was, wanted by the team, but a really good weekend series overall, I thought, for women's hockey and St. Cloud as they matched up with Wisconsin. We'll talk a little bit about some Minnesota Wild hockey, check in and see some of the cool point streaks that are going on and what some of those players that were a little bit quieter throughout the beginning of the season have really started to heat up. And then our extra ice session. We've been waiting a little bit to be able to talk about this, and now we have a moment to be able to do it. It's the release of the women's hockey rosters for the Olympic national teams and how that relates to a popular video game related to hockey. As always, we'll start with Center Ice View news and notes and the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. Center Ice View news and notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Center Ice View news and notes, Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup here, Noah. Huskies, oh boy, a bit of a humbling weekend, right? Now, I didn't talk about this last week, and I probably should have, but I did a little bit on how North Dakota, I figured, would come out pretty hard. Their backs were against the wall. I still thought St. Cloud was the better team going into the weekend as far as just how they were playing. But let's just say North Dakota was definitely motivated to make sure that this slide that they were on ended. And oh boy, did they make sure it did. 3-goal first period propelled to an eventual 7-1 win on Friday. So a little bit of revenge for the Friday night that happened at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. Mckinnon scoring the lone goal for the Huskies in that victory for North Dakota. Saturday, the Huskies had a chance. They were up 3-1 before it was tied in the third period off of, some pretty sick mitts there from Olympian Jake Sanderson. Mike and Miller, another shorthanded goal. VD Mckinnon as well as Nick Perbix got the 3 goals for the Huskies. So technically ends in a tie, though that North Dakota wins in the shootout. That's more for conference points. So, it is what it is. Not a great weekend for St. Cloud. So 14-8 overall for the record there, 6-6 in conference play. If there was any solace to this, Noah, was, St. Cloud still 5th in the conference in standings, so looking to chase home ice here. Duluth also split with Western Michigan, so they're still 6 points out of a spot here, that's going to get tough to make up unless you start to play a team, 4 times. So they do have 4 head-to-head matchups here coming up with the Bulldogs, try to gain that ground back. And again, as you mentioned a couple of times with their schedule, Again, it doesn't get any easier traveling to Denver this weekend, who is number 3 in the country and who had a great week themselves.
Yeah, in fact, by the way, I think speaking on both men's and women's side, I'm just trying to pull it up now. I think the women's team, they played Duluth actually in 2 days. So they're going to have their matchup. And then the men's team, it's a week later, that following Tuesday, the 8th, that they're going to play. And then do they play the following Tuesday after that? I never scrolled down that far. But
I believe it is, yes.
St. Cloud, let me see. Let me pull up their schedule here. Can you tell how prepared, of course, we are on this on this Sunday morning? As always,
either way, I don't think it means as much as for the women's as it does for the men's as far as points are concerned.
It is February 22nd is the second one. So the Huskies will play February 8th on a Tuesday. They will travel to Western Michigan. Then they would play the next weekend against Nebraska, Omaha, and then actually host Duluth on the 22nd of February. So they'll be up at Amsoil. Apologies. Both those games at the Herberts National Hockey Center. How about we talk about the Herberts National Hockey Center? Women's hockey was back in action as well. By the way, the men's team facing number 3 Denver, like you had mentioned next week. Forgot to mention that as well. But women's hockey facing one of the best teams in college hockey on the women's side in Wisconsin. Pretty impressive weekend for this group, all things considered, I would say. Olivia Savard, the lone goal of the weekend from Courtney Hall and Dale Ross. And when I say that, you're like, well, Noah, how is that a great weekend if you only scored 1 goal? Well, the Huskies technically skated to a 1-1 draw against Wisconsin. Wisconsin getting the win in the shootout there, but with the unofficial winner, they went 1 for 5 on the power play, did the Badgers in that game. Shots 55-19, so a lot of shots given up, but fifth-year Emma Paluzny stopping 54 of those in a very, very impressive performance to keep the team in it. On Saturday, Wisconsin did seal the win that night with a 4-0 finish and a power play goal in that one as well. Sophomore Sonia Hola got the call, 37 of 41 stops in the loss, though, so pretty impressive from the sophomore. So the team moving to 8-14-2 on the season and 3-13-2 in conference play. And like I mentioned, their next game is this Tuesday at 3 p.m. against Duluth. I was impressed, not only by the box score, but I think that, it's been a challenging road for this Huskies team on the women's side when it comes to playing Wisconsin. You go back to the historical splits. The team is 6-83-3 against this team. It's only the 9th time that the Huskies have played in whatever it is, 91 games against Wisconsin, that they haven't lost or tied the hockey game. And that's a big stepping stone against a team like Wisconsin, who is, a powerhouse every year in the WCHA. It's good to see the result.
Yeah, I mean, you still want the win, obviously, right. But to hang with them is still for this organization still a stepping stone, no matter how you slice it. So it's good to see that they're making progress, and then obviously the next step will be to see if they can't get another number added to that first column, which is the win column, right? So let's move forward, shall we? Because there's still a ton of information to get to. This has more to do with the not so bright side of hockey the last week or so. So the ECHL, the Jacksonville Icemen, their defenseman Jacob Panetta was suspended. I believe officially it's indefinitely for the rest of the season.
It's down lower in your notes. You'll get there.
Got it.
38 games. He can apply for reinstatement to the ECHL after March 17th. So yes, it's a rest of season suspension technically.
Sure. Was a fluid situation. I know it initially wasn't definitely, then it was season, then it was, as you mentioned, 38 games. Either way, made a racist gesture. It was directed towards Jordan Subban. Obviously, brother of New Jersey's D-man PK Subban. Jordan has... trying to think. Yeah. So he tweeted, no, this is Jordan Subban. As I began to turn my back, he started making monkey gestures at me. So I punched him in the face multiple times, and he turned like a coward he is. So no holding back there from Jordan Subban is how he interpreted the gesture. So Panetta was banned initially, as I mentioned, for the rest of the season. And now after 38 games, he can apply to be reinstated. So that would be after March 17th would be the 38 games would be when that would take place. This is pending successful completion also of a learning experience conducted in conjunction with the National Hockey League's Player Inclusion Committee. So NHL having an impact even on the basically our tier 3 league, which I think is good. So,
yeah, I also really like, by the way, to jump in, how the Icemen, they released Panetta too. I mean, that's a big move,
Well, yeah, I think it's
a big move for the hockey world. I don't think in years past we would see something like that. I think a team would stand by a player or kind of hang on to him a little bit longer. But Jacksonville was like, nope, we're not going to be a part of this.
Well, and that's the way it should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's good to see that these things are being addressed not only directly but very quickly thereafter. Because I think that's the other part of it in years past was, these things kind of maybe got swept under the rug. And then, as as time goes past, the likelihood of these things actually having a conversation go down quite significantly. So good to see the ECHL and the team making the right decisions. Let's head back to the NHL, because this happens to be a little bit it's still not good. So Jake Virtanen, former Vancouver Canuck, officially been charged with sexual assault. Now, why officially is there was some allegations that came forward last May, and this apparently was an incident stemming from 2017. The Canucks, while he was with the club, placed him on leave after allegations. And then after, I guess, just for multitude of reasons, he was bought out by Vancouver. So then he signed as a free agent with Spartak Moscow, the KHL. He denied the allegations in June, but now officially charged with the crime now, some years later. So not good for Jake Virtanen. And I would imagine this probably had something to do with why the Canucks moved in the direction that they did.
Yeah, obviously the team kind of has their own internal investigation, but yeah, not a good look. I mean, a couple of former Canucks in that category. I mean, Reed Boucher, like we kind of briefly mentioned last week as well too. It's not a good look. Some of these players are starting to kind of be found out for some of these past actions, as they should be, and hopefully all of that resolves in an appropriate manner. Speaking of resolutions, Nick, let's head on over to Arizona once again. The Coyotes are in talks in a very unique one with Arizona State University about temporarily using the Sun Devils' 5,000 capacity rink for the next 3, potentially 4 years while they await approval and construction of a proposed permanent arena in Tempe. So like we mentioned, a proposed 3-year deal with a potential option for a 4th season. Now, due to NCAA rules, the Coyotes cannot actually use Arizona State's hockey areas. No. So their locker rooms, kind of their facilities, things like that, besides obviously the ice surface and things like that. So that could cost between $15 and $20 million alone just for the Coyotes to add on to that rink, not to mention the proposal and construction of a big rink for the Coyotes in the future on top of that. And I find it very interesting that Gary Bettman in the league has talked about, we're not going to relocate this team. That's a big price tag to pay. Although granted, when have the Coyotes had more than 5,000 people in the building since 2012? So
a couple of things here, right? This is, first of all, this is hilarious because, and this was for those who follow hockey, Elliot Friedman, the Sportsnet reporter, says because the Coyotes would have to construct both a practice facility, because they can't use theirs, plus the locker rooms, that 15 to 20 million is very low. No, in fact, he's estimating it's actually closer to 50 or 60 million dollars as the initial investment for them to be able to use the facilities. And not only that, right? We talked about how during the pandemic, the NHL was very dependent on ticket sales, right? So you take a 5,000 seat arena, you make those adjustments as you need to. Now you're down to what he's saying, almost 32 to 4,200 seats. So you're taking away already almost 1,000 seats. Let's just put it on average. So what are these tickets going to sell for? I don't know. I'm surprised the league would approve of this too, just considering that, how league revenue is generated, one, and also shared. Remember, teams' ticket sales, merchandise sales are put into a pool called HRR, hockey-related revenue, and that is split equally amongst all 32 squads at the end of the year after all the financials have been basically confirmed and retallied and essentially put into pool. But I'm just, all this hinges, no matter what you think of this proposal, all hinges on Tempe being approved, and that still has not happened yet. In fact, there continues to be discussions with Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. For those who don't follow the story, the concern is very similar to the LA Stadium SoFi, where they had to dig at SoFi 120 feet down to make sure that the building height, which is in the direct path of a landing runway, that the height didn't break FAA regulations on where they were specifically. I can attest to this. When I was flying to LA a couple of years ago, I was filming a documentary for St. Cloud. I could literally look out my plane window, and I could literally peer directly straight down to the roof of SoFi. It was really, really cool. Don't get me wrong, but Phoenix Sky Harbor and this proposed Tempe arena for the Arizona Coyotes, this is exactly the same problem. And so, to me, all of this with ASU hinges on Tempe being available. And I'm curious as to why the NHL would approve of something this small.
So that's my question. And we all know, okay, the Coyotes suck this year, right? They have the second fewest wins in the NHL. Their average attendance, Nick, this year is just over 11,000. Put that in perspective. That's what fills Ralph Engelstad Arena every night. That's still a lot of people.
Are you putting North Dakota on a pedestal? Because if you are, this is not the podcast to do it.
My question is this. If you're Arizona, if you're the league, you know that they're kind of ousted from Glendale. What do you do here?
And that's the thing is I don't think you're doing this unless you really feel that this was the only option. Now, mind you, what was funny? Remember a couple of months ago when the initial Tempe project became public, the whole idea, right?
Right.
And Glendale, the city of Glendale, and the Gila River Management essentially committee came out and said, what the heck are you doing going behind our backs when you were, talking with us about a potential extension? I think what this signifies, and granted, I could be completely wrong, right? Because the perception is there's zero chance that the Coyotes go back to Gila River Arena. I still don't think that's entirely true. Now, they're obviously
Isn't it ironic, by the way, that they're potentially willing to pay $50 million for all these renovations, but yet they could not afford the simple fee?
And here's the fun.
I don't say simple, but you know what I mean.
And here's the other thing too, right? Not only did you put that money up front, but then you're also taking into account the lost revenue that you would have gained for the extra people from the ticket sales, concessions, everything else. This is probably going to cost the Coyotes, I want to say, close to $100 to $150 million. But it's all said and done. And that might even be very conservative, just in terms of having to do the necessary additions / changes to the ASU arena, plus again also the lost ticket revenue. On top of that, you're talking about a potential multi-billion-dollar development in the Tempe area. This is, and like you said, the whole tax issue and everything else. I mean,
and let's say they do all of this, and the Coyotes continue to suck, and 10 years from now they're out of Arizona.
I don't think so.
I'm just saying. Just saying. What if the average attendance, doesn't come above 10,000?
Here's the problem. No, the problem is the minute that this arena breaks ground, you are stuck there for at least 20 to 30 years. Period. That is it. If a stadium, whether it's Tempe, or I've also heard from Elliot Friedman, if the Tempe one doesn't get approved, there's also a secondary plot of land very close to that, which they would explore. The minute an arena is broken ground, you are there for 20 to 30 years.
So we've had the discussion too, and I know we're kind of rambling on here, but about the Houston Aeros and how Houston has some of those facilities. Is Houston looking like more and more of an option for this team? I mean, if you were this group, would you take a look at an AHL facility?
Well, so first of all, AHL facility, NHL facility, it's not deemed an AHL facility. It's a professional building. That's where the Houston Rockets, the NBA play.
But there's no NCAA ties to it. So the renovations are.
No, I understand that. The issue is you have an NHL commissioner that does not want to have an expansion team blow up in front of his face. You have an ownership group recently with Alex Mariuello, who, despite the public offerings, have certainly made their share of mistakes. I think they're absolutely committed, and I think this plan shows financially that they're committed to it. They're obviously having the discussions. They made the proposal. Again, this is a joint effort with the league and the ownership group to keep the Coyotes in Arizona. To me, Houston is the only reason Houston comes up is if everything else in Arizona fails. Yes, we're getting closer to that threshold, but there's still plenty of opportunity with both this recent, temporary home with ASU, also with the Tempe deal still being worked out. Again, there's a secondary plot of land in play in case the original plot is deemed to not be sufficient or, can't work. So to me, there's still a lot on the table for Arizona to be a permanent home for the Coyotes. And I just don't think the Houston part of the conversation is there just yet.
Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind in my head is yikes. But anyway,
right.
Let's move on to things that are a little bit more consistent. Speaking of
this is consistent, just consistently bad. So.
Yeah. Speaking of the Arizona Coyotes, former Coyote Keith Yandle, in milestone news, finally broken the NHL's longest Ironman streak at 965 games. This, of course, is just for regular season play only. The defenseman surpassed Doug Jarvis at 964 contests, and Yandle hasn't missed a game since he last played with the Coyotes back on March 22nd of 2009. Kind of a cool celebration. Unfortunately, the moment coming amidst a franchise worst 13-game losing streak out there in Philadelphia. So not a lot of things to really hang your hat on if you're a Flyers fan right now. Let's kind of move over to the East Coast for another milestone, shall we? The Minnesota Wild were on hand for this one. In New York, spoiling the jersey retirement of Henrik Lundqvist. Number 30 raised to the rafters after 15 seasons in the National Hockey League, all of which essentially with the Rangers. He never actually played for the Capitals. He retired as the franchise leader in both regular season and playoff wins, shutouts, and games played. And he is the 11th player in franchise history to have his number retired out there in New York. So congratulations to Mr. Lundqvist and Keith Yandle for their accomplishments, and wishing them the best of luck. Lundqvist in his broadcasting role, actually talking in the game against Minnesota the other night about how they couldn't let a guy like Matt Zuccarello score with time and space, and then he scored less than a minute later. So
he basically scored as he said it. You talk about some of the all-time good guys in the league. Henrik Lundqvist has always been that guy.
Is he a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, well, yes, 100%. And for me, his conduct both on and off the ice, just all the stuff that he did. I mean, he's a remarkable dude. Absolutely deserved the number to be retired. I do think he is a Hall of Famer, no question. And I think he will have a future in the NHL at some point if he wants to. I'm not sure broadcasting is his cup of tea, but I do know that if he did go on TV, he's certainly got the swagger for it. My goodness. He certainly hasn't looked like he's aged a bit, but I think that he would be actually quite a good executive, just the way that he's got people skills. He knows how to communicate. I think he could land in that type of role if he wanted it. Let's go back to some current NHL affairs, right? How about this? Ottawa's Nick Holding getting a 1-year extension. Pittsburgh's Jeff Carter a 2-year extension. And how about this for Vancouver finally getting their new GM as former Penguins president of hockey operations. That's Patrick Elvin. So Vancouver completing the remake of the front office as we know it. So now they can continue to focus on the rest of this season, plus also the upcoming NHL entry draft. But how about this? The rumors swirling finally come to fruition. Evander Kane officially signing with Edmonton for the remainder of the season. $750,000 salary to $625,000 signing bonus. Last I checked, that does not help with the gambling debt at Caesar's Palace, but we'll have to double check on that. And I make a little joke on that just because,
it's bad. It's bad.
It's bad. And I want to be very clear with this. I feel bad for the guy because there's a lot of people that have gambling problems. It's not just Evander Kane. His name just gets attached to it because of just the amount of money that he owes. It's a big, with him being a professional athlete and having access to a professional athlete's salary, right?
Yeah.
It's certainly, you could see how that circle of downward spiral, kind of self-fed each other. I actually feel bad. I do feel bad for him.
You know what they say, more money, more problems, man.
Right. And we hope that, he's able to, obviously get that situation sorted out. But off the ice, right? It's the stuff coming out of San Jose, with maybe some of the off ice stuff in the locker room that I think has a lot of people concerned, especially in Edmonton. So the cap hit, right? So because, 750, it's prorated. So that's why the cap hit's actually 2.1 million. It's a full no move clause for the rest of the season. There's a lot of people saying, Noah, that Vander Kane is going to be a very big point maker. I tend to agree that he's going to be motivated because, again, the numbers don't add up with what he owes and what he makes. He wants to continue to play hockey. So I think this is a trial for him.
And he's definitely good enough. Like you kind of talked about with Edmonton, they just won their 5th game in their last 17 tries. I mean, he had a goal last night in the first period and, 17 minutes of ice time and a 7-2 win over Montreal. Now, granted, I know that this probably lends itself to the score, but I mean, he played more than Leon Draisaitl last night,
Yeah, and at the end of it, Edmonton is it's been a little bit pissy up there, to quote an Edmonton beat writer. It's funny because Jim Matheson, who made that comment, just real quick, I've followed him for a number of years, and he's done some great work, and you kind of wonder if that wasn't a little strategic on his part. Doesn't mean I agree with what he was trying to do, but at some point as a journalist, you're trying to get away from the everyday same answering points. And for those who are watching, that's not the way to do it. But yeah, interesting times in Edmonton. Yes, 5 in the last 17, not as bad as the Philadelphia Flyers. My goodness gracious, but still trying to do something to get themselves back on track. Even though for me, Edmonton's woes have not been on the offensive side of the puck; it's been more on the the defensive side. Anyways, let's continue. Right, Sabres netminder Craig Anderson will make his first start since November. Aaron Dell was waived amidst his 3-game suspension there in Buffalo, so Buffalo continues to make us laugh. Of note, Ottawa's Drake Batherson will miss at least 2 months with an ankle sprain after a collision with Aaron Dell. That was connected, right? So for those who missed it, Aaron Dell, puck was coming behind the net, and essentially Aaron Dell threw an open ice body check. He crushed him. Yeah, was actually penalized on the play.
Yeah, let's throw this out. We only have about 4 more injuries for those who are wondering what's left for the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. But I got to be honest, this was kind of dirty. There was no reason.
Kind of, it was dirty.
There was no reason for it. I mean, I was like, wow. I mean, I know that goaltenders sometimes like to get the elbows out, but I know this goes back to the opening up a can of worms, but the age-old talk about are goaltenders eligible to be contacted then if they're going to step out of their crease. I still think we kind of run along the lines of no, not really, unless they're, in Timbuktu like Patrick Wcha was one day. But
oh boy.
but yeah, that was, I don't know, as an attacking forward, I sure would like to not get forearm shivered when I'm coming around the net just because the goaltender is untouchable, quote unquote.
Well, and again, as there's two main points here, right? First of all, in hockey, in physical, right? At least when you're going to be engaged in a physical altercation, at least what's coming. With goaltenders, because they're not supposed to check, part of what made this injury happen was Drake Batherson had no reason to believe that a goaltender was going to step out and lay shoulder in him. So there's no way he was prepared for that hit, right? And like you said, does this open up that can of worms? Because he was penalized, so the referees did call the penalty. He was then suspended for that hit. But as we know in hockey, more sports than anything else, they tend to police themselves as players too. So you kind of wonder if Aaron Dell finds another net to play in, whether he might he might be on the receiving end of a Dion Phaneuf kind of check. Yeah. But you hope not. I mean, goaltenders with that extra padding, with that extra weight, especially if they get hit or whatnot, it's much easier to tweak something, especially a ligament. So to me, I still don't think they should be checked, but at that same time, that means they also can't, initiate body contact.
It also looks a lot better if Drake Batherson doesn't miss 2 months with that, Oof.
Yeah, not good. So to finish up, let's just round this up real quick. Adam Fox, the stud D-man from the former Norris Trophy winner, up with an upper body issue. Chicago's Jonathan Taba has a concussion. He's had a couple of concussion issues as of recent. Speaking of concussions, Avs star Nate McKinnon, a concussion with a facial fracture of a very weird contact with Taylor Hall there from Boston. That actually ended up helping an Avalanche rally to win that hockey game. And then back to San Jose, Erik Karlsson will be reevaluated in March. So he'll be out for a while after forearm surgery, which that sucks because Karlsson actually was having at least kind of a bounce back season, 26 points in 33 games. But nonetheless, will be out for a little bit.
Welcome back into episode number 97 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. We had a very lengthy Huskies Illustrated weekly roundup this week. That's cool. That's all right because we're hanging out. Let's bring in my co-host as always, Nick Maxon, joining myself, Noah Grant. Nick, how was the Sunday? We are in the last days of January, heading into February here. Women's hockey coming up in the middle of the week. Men's hockey traveling to Denver. Women's hockey also has a couple games, I believe, this weekend after that, if I'm not mistaken. But in your world, what's going on? How have you been?
It's been crazy, right? Called the high school hockey game yesterday. It was Roseau and St. Cloud, the Crush. So not St. Cloud Apollo / Tech. Not St. Cloud Cathedral, who is the more prominent program in the area, but holy cow, for St. Cloud State fans, their commit Thor Bufflin, holy hell does he look good. For those who, if you want me to make a comparison, he's just a bigger, more patient Jack Ashawn. So Jack Ashawn, definitely more of a puck moving defenseman. Definitely, can see the ice well. He made a lot of great plays. He loves to stretch the ice too. Was on all the power play one opportunities, was able to pinch down, just very smart with the puck. So he's going to be a great fit for the St. Cloud State Huskies. Rosa winning that game 3-0. They had a great weekend. They ended up beating St. Michael Albertville on Friday 9-2. For the first win of the weekend. St. Cloud, oh boy, only 16 shots on goal. Roseau had like 35. So basically the entire second period, Roseau was in the St. Cloud end because of the long change. But holy cow, Ben Condon, the goalie for St. Cloud, he put on quite the show. He was very, very good. He kept Roseau, which their power plays clicking at over 28% completely off the board in 4 tries. So it was kind of fun to catch some high school hockey. Again, one of the better teams in the country. Also, a face that will eventually be joining St. Cloud. I'm not sure, mind you, I should say he's a verbal commit, so I'm not sure if he joins next season or if he's going to end up playing in juniors, but he looks promising from what I saw. But other than that, like you said, it's end of January. This below zero crap that we've been dealing with for the last 2 weeks here in the Twin Cities. When you get to like the second week of February, that's when you sort of start to get out of it permanently. I say sort of because, hashtag global warming, but no, it's not global cooling for those who are asking. But yeah, it's going to get very busy here for the Huskies in February. As you mentioned, both the normal weekend series plus HP is also broadcasting those 2 midweek games for the men's side against Duluth. So this is going to be a very busy next 3 weeks. And yeah, we're getting ready to start filming the documentary here with Spencer Meyer. So at the end of the day, it only gets busier from here.
Great guy Spencer Meyer is. And you talk about the comparison, by the way. Did Jack Ashawn have a good Huskies career? I feel like he did.
Last I checked, it was average.
Yeah, it was all right for a defenseman.
He's all right.
Jack was just a wonderful human being. You talk about those two guys, Jack Ashawn and Spencer Meyer, of course, former teammates and captains of this St. Cloud State men's hockey squad in the past couple of years. Just great stand-up human beings, by the way. Can't say enough about either of them. I mean, Jack always, has been so cordial and kind to anybody that comes down, and Spencer's been the same way as well too. So let's move on, shall we? I had a great week. I was just kind of hanging out, doing some putting some needles in people, just casually. It's whatever, it's fine. But I'm a nursing student, so that's acceptable. Other than that, other than other than giving immunizations, just kind of trying to stay alive.
I think the only needle reference we need on this podcast is when someone threads the needle, Noah. I don't think we want to hear about, and that's a pass. We don't want to hear about, actual metal things that are hollow going into flesh.
Here's the thing. When it comes to IVs or whatever it is, I always chuckle because, I'm
see what I did there, folks? See, I told him not to do it, and he actually goes into detail.
I'm just saying, I mean, I'm this way too, but everyone comes in and they're like, I'm afraid of needles, or I don't like needles, or that sort of thing. That's a good thing. When you come in and you say you like needles, I get worried. Like I find it funny that everyone always has to want to tell their nurse, I don't like needles, or, I'm afraid of needles. Like, that's a good thing. You shouldn't like getting poked. But nonetheless, get poked, get your immunizations, get all those things done because they are important. My immunization is actually related to infants. So, not fun to hear the babies scream and cry, but they need their immunizations, and it's important. End rant on that one. I'm coming for you, anti-vaxxers. Let's move on to some trivia, shall we? The Minnesota Wild have had some large crowds in history. However, which Wild game at the National Hockey League level at the Xlargy Center holds the largest historical attendance for Minnesota? I don't think you're going to get this one, Nick, unless you've seen the trivia question. Which game do you think? Can you even get the year, first of all?
May 6, 2014, Game 6, second round against Chicago Stanchion Gate.
Close. Game 3. Not Game 6.
Was it Game 6?
It was Game 3. It was
Game 3?
Yeah, it was 4-0 win for the Wild. So it was the first time that the Wild had been. It was the first time the Wild had been in the second round since 2003. So that was the reason for that attendance. But boy, Stanchion Gate. Wow, you think my needles are bad? That's a heavy hitter in the morning, man, Nick. I see that replay in my nightmares. I mean, think about that. The Wild win that game in overtime. It's Game 7 for a potential chance to go to a Western Conference Final for the first time
against the LA Kings, and that would have been tough. LA was a wagon that time of the year. So
well, they did end up winning a cup that year. So casually. Yeah. But nonetheless, yes, you are correct. Kaelin Addison, first-time winner on the show. Congratulations to her. Excited about that and seeing her be successful. Let's talk about the Minnesota Wild, shall we? And the impressiveness they've had as of late, stringing a couple of hockey games together. And I think the thing that's been most impressive, Nick, is not only the production from some of the players that we're going to get to, but the fact that the production has come while the schedule has not been rigorous or consistent, compared to what we've seen in terms of, past years. Obviously, a pair of wins against Chicago, beating Montreal, and then hanging on, or clawing their way back technically, and then hanging on against the New York Rangers. Freddie Gaudreau with the game winner in the game yesterday. And it's the New York Islanders tonight. Their last loss. How about this, Nick? In the month of January, this is our last game, of course, this month, today. Only 2 losses for Minnesota in this month. Of course, the Winter Classic on the 1st, and then Colorado in a shootout. So they grab a point out of that one too. So really, out of all the games that they played so far in January, they've only dropped 3 points total in that stretch. So very impressive wins against Boston, Washington, and Anaheim as well. But the big producers, Kevin Fiala on a 10-game point streak, Matt Zuccarello extending that as well, the longest active leaders right now in the National Hockey League. I believe the franchise record for a point streak is Mikael Granlund at 12. But Matt Zuccarello is one of only 2 players to have a 6-game consecutive multi-point game streak, and the other one happens to be a guy by the name of Connor McDavid. So pretty impressive season for Matt Zuccarello as he continues to get older. Ryan Hartman, 14 points in his last 12 games. And Matt Boldy, what an infusion he has been. 7 points in his first 8 contests as a National Hockey League player. So, Nick, what is making this Minnesota Wild team click, even though they had, Nico Sturm and somebody else on COVID protocol, entering the game against the Rangers? How has this team continued to win and continued to win in the fashion that they have?
It's just the depth, and it's the way that they're playing the game. Everybody's on the same page. The defense are very active in the offense. They don't spend a whole lot of time in the defensive zone. So you talk about, the 3 keys is, can we be more on offense? Can we make sure we're getting our timely saves when we need them? And there are more, or the lineup more than just a few contributing. Yeah, you talk about those 10-game streaks with Fiala as well as Zuccarello, but you have to have other contributors. And in fact, a couple of games ago was some fourth liners getting into the mix, but holy cow, has Matt Boldy really solidified that. Can you even call it a third line? I mean, geez. But and the reunite of the grief line, right? The Greenway, Eriksson, and the Foligno. I mean, holy cow, Foligno 17 goals on the year. I mean, holy freaking buckets, man.
How about the fact that it's whatever it is, 150 minutes of ice time? They haven't given up a goal. Now that I say that, they'll probably get scored on, but
probably,
yeah.
But like I said, they're getting it done, all 200 feet of the ice, and the thing is, as you mentioned, the schedule has been favorable for them in terms of not the opponent, but in terms of the timing. That's all going to change here the next couple of weeks when they have basically a game every other day for 2 weeks straight during the what was supposed to be the Olympic break. It's going to be tough.
As you had mentioned, to throw a schedule out for the people, Islanders tonight, Chicago on Wednesday, then off until the following Tuesday, Winnipeg that day, then Carolina on Saturday, and then right after that, as you have mentioned, that's where it starts to really pick up. They've got 3 games the following week, and then 4 the next, and 3 the next, 3, 4, 3. So they're really starting to get that extra game or two in that we've been accustomed to seeing in the NHL schedule. Hopefully, everything going according to plan there.
The concern I have is not that the team plays. It's you worry about them being healthy as far as injuries. You worry about them being fresh and rested. Because obviously it's not just going to play a game; it's travel as well. Because some of these are road games. So yeah, this is still going to be a test. I think Russo said was it 41 games in 81 days or something like that. It was pretty close to that. That's a lot of hockey in a short amount of time. The math is, as you mentioned, it's basically a game every other day, where it has been basically a game and a half every week so far. So, I mean, it's going to ramp up pretty quick. You just kind of hope. And I guess the only concern I have, Noah, and I'll kick this over to you, is that's a lot in a short amount of time, and that leads them right to the playoffs. The concern I have is, are they going to be just tuckered out by the time we get to March and April hockey? That's my concern.
Well, the question mark is, who has been healthy? I feel like, maybe the question kind of serves where they will be healthy just because they have so many guys who have been in and out of the lineup. Finally getting Jonas Brodin back the other day, that was nice to see, but he's missed a chunk of hockey. I think the other scary piece of this too, and you hope that it doesn't come to fruition, is the fact that, 41 games in just over 80 days, if you have COVID that comes in on a swing up to Canada or something like that, and you can't make up those games, or you got to find a way to do it. I mean, that's something that gets packed at the tail end of the season, or potentially pushes the playoffs back, or you don't get to play those games. And that's something that in this Central Division, with the way that Colorado has been playing as of late, you need every game and being able to play those as well too. And like you mentioned, the rest is going to be challenging entering the playoffs, but I don't know. This team just has found a way this year. I don't know what it is. I think it's impressive. Even guys that we don't talk about in the score sheet that much, your Brandon Duhaimes, your Connor Dewars, players like that aren't big point contributors, have still just played their role fantastically. And when did we ever think that Marcus Foligno was going to be a guy that we looked at as a primo scorer in the National Hockey League, right? Very impressive him. I mean, he's having a career year. Ryan Hartman is making every Chicago Blackhawks fan, Nashville Predators fan, or Philadelphia Flyers fan cry, if they're not crying already in Philadelphia and Chicago because of the abhorrent seasons that each of those teams are having. Nashville's been actually a pretty exciting success story this year as well too. But yeah, I think that this Wild team is going to be just fine. They really haven't shown me any reason otherwise. And the playoffs are the playoffs. And maybe that's exactly what Minnesota needs, is to not have a favorable scenario entering the first round. And then, when everyone has kind of written them off because of that, then that's where they finally break that lid open and do what we've been waiting so long for them to do. And that's push their way potentially to a Western Conference final at least. So exciting to see there. I mean, what are your final thoughts on the Wild? Cam Talbot, by the way, returning to action. He's an all-star participant. Kind of looked more like himself against the Rangers the other night. How did he look to you? And is there anyone else on this Wild team that we haven't talked about, closing thoughts that has really kind of stood out for you as of late?
I thought he looked fine. I mean, we've touched on, a lot, but I think there's one name that I think everybody was cringing early on because of his performance. But how about Jamie Benn, who has really settled in to that 7th D role?
But what about Kaelin Addison?
I know. What about Kaelin Addison? I know. You said one name. Let's keep it to one. So, but I mean, seriously, I mean, that was a concern and a rightful concern. He came in, and I would guess it was probably more just, systematic stuff. He just didn't know where to be. You're still trying to figure out your defensive partner. He's really found his groove. Now, granted, does that mean he's the best defenseman in the world? No, but he's serviceable. That's what you need your 7th D to be. You need him to be able to come in, whether it's an injury or whether the guy needs rest, be able to go back and play good, solid hockey. And he's done that, especially with some of the injuries and COVID protocol situations the Wild have had to deal with. So that's good news. Because as you mentioned, Kaelin Addison, he's a call up away if you need him. But you have Jordy Ben on the bench in the press box if you need him as well. So the Wild have depth, not only that on their current roster if everybody's healthy, but they got guys who can come in, step up, and can contribute. So this is a team that's a little bit more insulated than in years past, right? It's a team that, at least for me, one guy goes down, the entire, house of cards falls of the years past. This is not that for Minnesota. That's exciting. This is the most promising roster / performance we've seen out of this franchise in quite some time. There's legitimate cup contingency here. Question is, can you get through the rest of the regular season on this same trajectory, and then can you then elevate? And that's the thing, right? You can't just go into the playoffs with the same game. You have to elevate it to another level, and that's the question we'll have to answer come April and March.
Yeah, but Nick, Ryan Suter has 17 points this year, and he's +3. Okay, so
cool.
Anyway,
I don't care about Dallas, who happens to be
a dumpster fire of
9 points behind the Wild right now, and they've also played 2 more games. I really don't care. So
let's talk about standings, shall we? We're going to move over to some college hockey here, men's college hockey. What the hell happened in North Dakota? That's what the name of this segment is. But here's the thing, though, Nick. I got to be honest with you, and we had a discussion last night about this with Caleb Peabody a little bit. I mean, St. Cloud is a shot away from winning that hockey game last night. Had a much better start on Saturday. Shots were even at 30 apiece. Power play opportunities were even. In fact, St. Cloud had the special teams advantage with a power play goal last night as well, too.
And a shorty.
Yep, and the faceoffs favored North Dakota as well as the block shots. Shots were pretty even throughout, the contest. St. Cloud a little bit of an edge in the first. North Dakota a tiny edge in the third period, even in overtime, even in the second period, basically. I don't know. We talked so much about this last weekend, right, with Miami, right, and we expected them to bounce back on Saturday. St. Cloud responded last night. They were not electric this weekend. Let's not sugarcoat it. But they were within one shot, more than a stone's throw of winning that hockey game. Had a chance, had a 2-goal lead at one point in that game.
Probably should have won.
This is the thing, is I think that everyone was so stunned by the 7-1 score that
you think.
But here's the thing. It's one game. Really, it is.
Here's the thing.
Hold on. But that's the thing, is like, you put that game out of your mind. They responded. That's not
how fans work,
right? But I'm saying that's how it should work. We see the result on Friday, we panic, we don't eke out the win on Saturday, and suddenly it's, you go on Twitter all the time. This team is garbage. So glad I didn't make the trip. Oh, this is going to be the story of this group. Just can't find a way to win. You know who freaking said that, Nick? Fans last year.
I know that.
Fans last year, especially when we went up to Amsoil, again, we're going to talk about this again, and got our doors blown off. And 6 weeks later, we're in a national championship game. Okay? People, relax. As long as St. Cloud is a top 16 team, they're in the big dance. As long as St. Cloud is facing a favorable NCHC opponent come playoff time, and they're playing the right way, they've got a chance. Okay?
So let's dive into that number, right? St. Cloud's schedule could put them, if things go not the way they want to, will put them on the bubble. As North Dakota, they were 13th in pairwise coming into this weekend. So when I talked last week at how North Dakota needed this weekend, they absolutely did. I think the chaining of events, right, is you destroy Miami, for lack of a better phrase, right, the entire weekend. And so the fans' perspective is, okay, this team is really that good. Now we can go up to North Dakota and do the same thing. You and I both know, and as hockey fans who are honest in the conversation know, as much as we want to think that St. Cloud's that good, it really was more that Miami is just that bad.
Yeah,
I hate to see it. I'm not trying to talk smack to another program because I mean, I feel bad for Miami. I mentioned that last week.
What a rebound they had though. They were 11 seconds away from beating Denver on Friday night.
Yeah. So I mean, they again, these sorts of games can be a turnaround for the season if you approach it the right way. 7-1 Friday, not pretty. Yes, we all know that. They came back, and I think the frustration with Huskies fans is, hey, at least if we're gonna, let's at least get the split, and they should have 3-1, and they give up a lead. So that's not good, right? That has to be corrected. So
yeah, but I would argue this though, Nick. If you're going to tell me on any given night you're going to hold North Dakota to 3 goals, would you take it?
I think the argument here is that I think St. Cloud is the better team, and you're putting North Dakota on a pedestal. Why the hell why do we keep doing that?
North Dakota's second in the NCHC, whether you like it or not, Nick.
No, I understand.
That's what I'm saying is
they're second in standings. But
I guess it doesn't even have to be North Dakota. Any NCHC team, if you hold them to 3 goals, you're going to give yourself a chance to win most nights, and they did last night.
Yep, but they should have held them better, right? That's the thing is, holding a lead this year has been an area of concern.
Yeah, but they gave up a goal a period. I got to be honest. I mean, that's not a terrible starting point when it comes to hockey. I just think fans were so stunned by Friday, and we talked about this on MNCAA, where I was like, I think North Dakota is going to grip the sticks too tight if they don't get on the board early. Well, what did they get right away? And
you also said St. Cloud was going to sweep.
Yeah, I also said that North Dakota was only going to score 4 goals. But here's the thing, is that early goal, that first weird little redirect that North Dakota scored, I think you could kind of feel the relief in the building. It was like, okay, we're on the board early here. Like, we're not getting beat 8-1 like we did, in St. Cloud, or we're not giving up the first goal in the first minute of the hockey game like we did. There was, that relaxation. And when you play relaxed, man, in a home building like North Dakota has with almost 1,200 people in that, facility, when you're buzzing, you're buzzing. I think that it was a little bit of a case of the Huskies, obviously a little flat, but
it was a perfect storm.
Yeah, getting stunned.
It was a perfect storm.
Getting stunned early and being on the road in one of the most difficult environments in college hockey. And you know what St. Cloud did? They responded on Saturday. I think that's the piece that you have to pull from this. I'm still not in the group that says the panic bells need to be hit just quite yet. Do the Huskies need to be better? Yes. Are they going to have an uphill challenge losing Nick Perbix and Sam Henches, especially Nick Perbix right now? Yes. Are they going to find a way? Yes. Because they always have.
Well, they have to. Yeah. That's the thing, right? So I think, and that's the other part of it too. I think the fans who follow the squad know that 2 of their best pieces are leaving for what could be an extended period of time. And again, when you're sitting in 5th in the conference, now granted, the top 5 are kind of in their own league right now, the bottom 3. Now, Omaha started to pick up a little bit of ground now. So like we mentioned, it could be a top 6, but every point's so critical. And yeah, losing 7-1 is never pretty by any squad. But I just think the fans thought that they would be better than that. Now, you and I both know that every team's going to have bad games. I mean, hell, St. Cloud, North Dakota, right? So we handed them a pretty humbling loss again at home just about a month and change ago, almost 2 months ago. But you do wonder, can this team, and I think that's the question, is I think people are making the impression that with Perbix and Henches and even more so Brett Larson gone, I think there's an apt to go to where this team will be different somehow or worse.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I buy that because again, the coaching staff's all on the same page.
And I think out of the 3 of them, to kind of jump in there, the one that's going to make the most difference, and that's no offense to anybody else. Obviously, Sam, Brett, and Nick are fantastic at what they do. Great hockey players, great coaches. Yes. Where you're really going to feel it is Nick Perbix, because having a puck moving offensive defenseman, they don't grow on trees.
No. No, they don't. And at the end of it, again, St. Cloud will they have to adjust, right? They had to adjust last Frozen Four without one of their best shots in Easton Brodzinski, right? So you have to find a way. And that's going to be, and again, this is the season coming up for the Huskies, right? You're losing these guys to a great opportunity Olympics. I would never, want that selfish mentality, which is let's stay here and that kind of no. But you got to find ways to win. So, and they're going to have to do it against really good opponents: Denver, Western Michigan, maybe Duluth, at least one of the two games. Yeah. And granted,
Omaha, maybe.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And, you hate to bring up the possibility, but man, if there is a quarantine situation, that would be to basically NCHC playoff time. Either way you slice it, I think the Huskies, and I think fans would agree that you talk about teams, especially this conference and playing in home. Huskies have not been a great road team this year. I do think that home ice is critical for this squad. I really do. And they're now 5 or 6 points back. And, and you're coming up to some of the top teams that have performed in the conference. These points are becoming very, very critical. And again, losing some of your top guns on both the offense and defensive side of the puck, it's just going to create the challenge to be a little bit more unique. I think was the way Brett would look at it. Is it's not an extra challenge; it's more of a unique challenge.
Boy, why don't we look the other direction in the standings? Colorado College, 4 wins in NCHC play, not too shabby. They're one win.
They're turning it around, man.
Yeah, they're 1 win behind St. Cloud. Now, granted, they've lost 8 games compared to 4 for the Huskies in conference play. So, take that with a grain of salt as you will.
They played 2 extra games, so.
Same with Omaha. You know what? Omaha has really puzzled me this year. They're a team that I think is, I believe they lost to Colorado College this weekend. I
believe they did, yes.
They've got 5 wins on the season, and they're 2 points behind the Huskies with 2 more games played. They've had a weird year. They were, we talked about one team that was going to obviously impress. I think the team that has head and shoulders done that this year is Denver in their response this season, which the Huskies, of course, have next. But Omaha was kind of the team that we expected to maybe be a little bit better right now than where they're at. Now, granted, it's still a lot of hockey left to be played, but nonetheless, it was kind of interesting there. But granted, Denver, number 3 team in the country entering this weekend, was 11 seconds away from losing to 49 Miami, in that game until I believe it was Cole Gutman tied that game with 11 seconds left, and they won it in overtime. And then Denver winning by only a score of 4-2. And their last goal coming at the 1852 mark of period number 3 against Miami. So the NCHC is the NCHC. And I think part of this comes down to the discussion we just had. Would you be comfortable holding a team to 3 goals on a night? And I think that's got to be the mentality in the NCHC, because these games, as we've seen with your Omahas, your Miamis, your Colorado Colleges especially, they've been wild cards. And we've seen teams lose or get swept one weekend and then go another weekend and beat a team that they weren't expected to beat. And then that team splits with somebody, but then sweeps somebody else, but then loses to this person. And all these NCHC teams are beating up on each other. I think Saturday is still more of a stepping stone than people want to give credit to it. Forget about Friday. Friday sucked. The Huskies didn't play well. Happens. Okay. But I think there's still a building point where the Huskies still have to have this formula to keep opponents at 3 goals or less in the NCHC. I still think it's there. I think their GAA this year still lends to that. You got to find a way to do it down the stretch. Yes, you're absolutely right. But I think that's what it's going to come down to is forget about wins and losses for a little bit. Yes, they're important, so don't forget about them entirely. But are you playing the right way? Are you giving yourself a chance to win every night? The Huskies have had great goaltending for the most part this year. David Rennick has had an exceptional year, I think. They've had scoring touch up and down the lineup. They've had a world-class defenseman in Nick Perbix, who has taken leaps and bounds, as well as a couple of freshman defensemen that have really added and infused to this defensive depth. There's a lot of good building blocks here. The question mark is, can the Huskies continue to improve on Saturday and put it all together against a really good opponent this weekend? Yes, they have to get the wins. I get that. But I think it goes back more to, are the Huskies doing the right things to keep themselves in a hockey game? Because as we're seeing in the NCHC this year, the results have kind of been all over the board. And really, it goes back to that consistency piece. Are you keeping a team at 3 goals or less on a Friday? And then are you doing it again on a Saturday? Now are you doing it for a full 60 minutes? Now are you doing it for 120 minutes over the course of a weekend and potentially overtime if necessary? I'm still not hitting the panic button yet. I'm concerned, but it's one weekend and it's one clunker of a Friday and a Saturday result that could have gone either way.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, they just have to hit the reset button and, go from there.
Oh, and fans, take a deep breath. It's okay. Enjoy the hockey. Enjoy college hockey. It's fun. It's exciting. It's, I don't know,
I know more and more, less and less, but more and more every day.
I know sometimes that Twitter makes me want to claw my eyes out. I try to avoid it if I can. But anyway, Nick, women's hockey had a very good weekend series against Wisconsin. We're kind of running a little bit short on time here, so definitely check out the box scores for that one. The reason I'm going to cut women's hockey a little bit short is because our extra ice session deals with a lot of women's hockey and kind of more the overall scope in relation to the WCHA related to some international rosters and Olympic news. Welcome into our extra ice session. Noah Grant alongside Nick Maxon. Happy to have you here. Just approaching just about an hour here on the show, a couple minutes till that. But Nick, we have some correlation where we talked quite a bit about men's hockey, about the Olympic rosters for the men's teams. Of course, Sam Henches, Nick Perbix, Brett Larson, talking about Eric Stahl on the Canadian side and some of the players that came out of the NCAA or former NHL players at that. Well, we've been waiting for this, the release of the women's hockey rosters actually for the World Championships on EA Sports, of course, NHL 22, the first time that we've seen the women's championships ever be represented in the game. And Nick, how cool is it to see, these rosters correlate, of course, to now the Olympics and the teams. Some of the players that are in the game, such as Laura Kluge for Germany, are not in the Olympics just because of the pooling and the teams that have made the Olympics this year. But Nick, what an incredible list for the Huskies. Janina Newland for Finland and Klara Hemlarova for the Czech Republic, making the trip out to Beijing. I believe they just landed yesterday and have just gotten to the Olympic Village. And then, you want to talk about some current WCHA players, Ashton Bell from Duluth, Emma Malte from Ohio State, a couple of St. Thomas bodies in there, Andrea Brandley from Ohio State playing on the Swiss team, a lot of Swiss players in the WCHA. Of course, Grace Zumwinkle, Abby Murphy, Emma Soderberg coming from Minnesota, and Duluth playing for the U.S. and Sweden there. And then a whole host, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 other players on that U.S. team alone that are former WCHA players that are now either playing professionally or otherwise, but are on that Olympic team. So, Nick, first of all, how amazing is it to see women's hockey in the video game world finally? It feels like it's long overdue. And then how exciting is it for these Huskies and a lot of these other WCHA players to show off their skills on the biggest stage in hockey?
Well, let's hit the EA Sports piece first, right? Long overdue, very much long overdue. You kind of wonder why it wasn't there in the first place.
Yep.
You really do. But, to the point, the WCHAs, we preach time and time again, it's the best, conference in women's college hockey. The numbers speak for themselves, right? When you're putting that kind of talent on the international stage, and granted, even with the Huskies, right, you still have good talent. Klara Hemlarova, as you mentioned, as one. Janina Newland as the other one. These ladies are getting an opportunity of a lifetime to go and compete on the international stage, see if they can't take home some hardware. And at the end of it, it puts women's hockey on the international stage, not the national stage. That's not right, Nick. And geez, going over to, overseas, been able to travel and be able to, catch in, something a little bit different and more so play some hockey against some, the world's best talent. So this is, how the game grows. This is how, you, even as a player, right, you learn and you grow by playing better talent than you. So kind of would like to see how both from the St. Cloud perspective, Hemlarova and Newland, as far as their games grow from an experience like this. But you mentioned Grace Zumwinkle from the Gophers. I mean, plenty of Gophers and Wisconsin Badgers on the list as well. Just to name one name that sticks out in my head. But holy cow, right? This is quite the statement here from the WCHAs that continue to inject talent not only in the pros, right, but also onto the international stage. So it's wonderful to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Nick. And you kind of look at some of the rosters here, and you get a chance. If you get a chance, there is a Wikipedia page called Ice Hockey at the 2022 Winter Olympics Women's Team Rosters. If you kind of want to get a good little glimpse at the rosters all in kind of one comprehensive chart. I believe the only team that's missing out of this is China's roster there. But yeah, looking at the teams, the U.S. and Canada have been kind of the powerhouses in women's hockey. But looking at some of these other rosters, I mean, there might be some surprises. I think this Swiss team, has a lot of college hockey players, and I think they might be more surprising than people will give them credit for. They could give a team a run for their money. But Nick, Group A: Canada, Finland, the Russian Olympic Committee, Switzerland, and the United States of America, all in Group A. And then China, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Japan, and Sweden in Group B there. Let's start with Group A, the one that everyone's going to be paying attention to here in the States: Canada, Finland, Russia, Swiss, and the United States there. What are your predictions there? Do you think that, does Finland maybe steal a game against Canada or the U.S.? Do you think Switzerland has a chance to maybe steal a hockey game? Or do you think Canada and the U.S. are going to duke it out and kind of be top dogs as they enter the medal round?
It's always been about Canada, U.S. On the women's side. Finland's good. Don't get me wrong, but I think they lack the depth that both the U.S. and Canada have on offense. Switzerland, no chance. ROC, no chance. It's going to be the U.S. and Canada unless someone lays an egg, that a very uncharacteristic egg. But if you look at the depth on the rosters between U.S. and Canada, it's just really unmatched. Especially if you even look at Marie-Philippe Poulin, who is an absolute fire. She's a fire wagon, man. I mean, she just makes things happen. Age 30 again. She's been big, especially in international tournaments. For Team Canada, just to name, probably the most recognizable name. But really, to me, it's all about the U.S. and Canada. Those two teams also just don't like each other. So when they do play, whether it's in the round robin or eventually most likely into a medal contention game, it's the best hockey that's out there. Still remember, was it 18? Or was it Sochi, the shootout winner from
one of the best, Jocelyn Lamoureux?
John Lamoureux, yeah, that was nasty.
I think it was it was one of the Lamoureux twins. But I tell you what, that was one of the best hockey games I've ever watched. I stayed up till 3:00 in the morning watching it. Yeah, and it's a shame that that game had to come down to a shootout, because that was one of the best overtimes I've ever seen. As
fantastic, really. So I mean, there's so much good talent on those two rosters. And again, the other thing is they've had success at this level. So to me, it's about those two.
And how exciting is it too? By the way, before we get back to the format, you're in St. Cloud, right? You're not having the season that you want, basically. You had Laura Kluge, who ended up going to the World Championships before that, didn't actually start, essentially. But then you've got Klara Himlarova and Yanina Newland, who are going to represent the Huskies on that international stage. You've got two former Olympians in that room, and Molly Engstrom and Janelle Sergey. Of course, Janelle Zog back in the day. How exciting do you think it is for Janelle and Molly to be able to be mentors and prepare these younger gals for that trip of a lifetime, knowing that they've been there themselves on that stage?
And this is the cliche, right? And the hockey players that will tell you itself, just get pucks deep, and the game doesn't change, right?
Simple game, right?
Simple game. Pass, shoot, score. Anyway, but seriously though, I mean, your mentality about the game can't change. Actually, you're playing better skilled opponents, but that doesn't mean you change what your game is personally or the game that you play. It just means that you have to do it a little bit quicker. You have to do a little bit smarter, and your mistakes are magnified. That's really what it comes down to. And I think for the Olympics, there's two things, right? Obviously, taking the moment. This is an opportunity of a lifetime that not everybody gets to have. So have fun with it, right? Yeah. And then obviously from the competitor's perspective, put it all out there. I mean, you just never know what can happen. How many chances do you get to be able to compete on the world stage? So, make sure that you come home and you've left everything on the ice, because at the end of it, whether you bring home a medal or not, you're going to always remember this time in your life, the memories, both on and off the ice, being in a foreign country, having that Olympic experience. So just try to absorb it, take it, and have fun with it, and have some good hockey.
Yeah, I wonder, when we've had discussions with Molly and Janelle, they talked about their first experience at the Olympics was a blur. And the second one, really, you start to pay attention to a little bit more the second time around, right? Yeah, Janina Newland playing for Finland will definitely play at least one game in the medal round. That's how it works. Finland, Canada, Russia, Switzerland, and the U.S. all in Group A. They will all make the medal round regardless. Every team in Group A does. And it's the top three teams from Group B. That includes Klara Himlarova's Czech Republic, China, Denmark, Japan, and Sweden. So, Nick, looking at Group B here, is there a team or two that you feel like they're pegged or probably gonna make that medal round as the final three teams in there, or do you feel like it might be kind of a mixed bag here?
Well, I think the two that we would both think would be there is Czech Republic and Sweden.
Yep.
I think the other dark horse means Japan. Japan actually has had a pretty good run on the women's side for hockey. Granted, there's still probably, to say lightly, a step below some of the other teams. But compared to the other two, I just feel like they have more talent. I think they actually had a pretty decent performance last Olympics too, as far as being in Group B. So to me, that is my pick. I'm not sure if you have another idea, but Japan would be my pick to round up that three in Group B.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think the other one, maybe, Denmark, curious to see kind of, what their squad has put together. It's hard to kind of assess some of the European players just because we don't get a chance to look at them a little bit. But yeah, in fact, maybe be kind of interesting to pull up the last Olympics, like you had mentioned, and see how Japan has fared on that stage. But, it's crazy. Going back to when you and I were kids, women's or men's, but, especially on the women's stage here, when do you think you would have ever thought that the People's Republic of China, would end up having a hockey team in the Olympics? And I don't say that condescendingly. I say that in the sense that China has not been a hockey market, at least when you and I were kids, Nick. And the NHL has done so much to grow the game there. Obviously, they have a lot of people there, a talent pool potentially that could really grow and really expand. And places like Japan that, maybe kind of fits that bill a little bit too. Are you just,
Actually, that's a funny story about that. So China's game has grown, and actually Minnesota has a lot to do with it. So there actually was a Chinese national training team 2 years ago that actually toured and actually practiced at the University of Minnesota, for those who don't know this. So they actually spent an entire summer here, basically going around from Duluth to the Gophers to St. Cloud, and they played hockey. And basically it was government funded from the Republic of China. And, it's funny to think about how the country was forking the money for them to come over to the U.S. to be taught the game, to play the game on these great facilities, right? So from what I understand, China's still very niche, even more niche than us. There's basically only rinks in Beijing, as far as, and it's not many, it's like 4, right? And mind you, China's over 1 billion people, right? So in perspective, that'd be like trying to play all the high school games in Minnesota at the Mariucci Target Center, because you can play hockey at the Target Center. That's kind of what their facilities are like in China. It's the ice time there is just not available. So they flew them over here. They learned from some of us, and so they could be a dark horse. But I thought that was kind of cool, because I actually end up talking with the manager of that program for quite some time. And essentially, and their schedule was almost a pro schedule. I mean, it was everyday practice. It was the right nutrition. We had a lot of film breakdowns. So, I mean, they were getting the crash course, and that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. I think, if I'm a player for the Chinese national team, and they know that North America is where hockey is at its highest, and you're going to Minnesota where they know it's the state of hockey. She goes, when the girls came over, they knew that it was the state of hockey. They didn't realize how deep it went until they got here and saw Mariucci, saw Ritter Arena, saw Amsoil, and got a chance to play. They were just awestruck by how this took place. They practiced a lot at the Blaine Super Rink. That was a lot of where their practices took place. But pretty fun. story there from the Chinese national team. So they may be that dark horse. But cool to see that the game is growing in the non-traditional markets that we normally associate hockey with.
Yeah, it's just such a disappointment they couldn't go to Massachusetts, because that's the real state of hockey. Anyway.
I will withhold all my rage with the comment.
You know what? Fair play to the guy who runs Hockey East, though. That definitely got St. Cloud State fans triggered. It was pretty good, and of course
that was just like Brad Marchand with Arizona saying they would have to probably give away the 4,500 tickets when they, if they do play at the ASU arena. That was pretty fun.
I tell you what, Brad Marchand got his own against Carolina a couple weeks ago, though. So you love to see it. But yeah, as you had kind of alluded to a little bit. And by the way, that was with Dave Starman, for those who want to go way back, a little less than a year ago, in the conversation that we had in mid-April after the Frozen Four. But yeah, going back to 2018, as you had kind of mentioned, a little bit different format, 2 less teams. Last time around, it was Canada, the US, Finland, and Russia that were in Group A, and then Group B was Switzerland, Sweden, Japan, and Korea. So let's kind of take a look here. Japan only having 1 win in that compared to 2 for Sweden and 3 for Switzerland. But you talk about this, right, for the 2022 Olympics. Switzerland is in Group A now, right? Yep. And Japan is still in Group B. Let's go back to 2018, that 5th place bracket. Japan beat Sweden in overtime. Okay. And then Switzerland beat Japan 1-0 in that hockey game. So you want to talk about how much parity is starting to get there between some of the more dominant European countries that we've seen on both the men's and women's side in years past, and then those newcomers like Japan, potentially like China this year. It's an exciting thing to see, and I think that as a U.S. fan, yes, we're excited for our Americans. We're excited to see them play Canada. We're always jacked for that, as always. But I think it's similar to the men's side, watching that parity become more apparent, watching the game grow in all these different places has been extremely exciting here, Nick. So the final thing I kind of want to touch on here, that's going to be the U.S. and Canada rosters here, and what, especially specifically what the U.S. is kind of bringing to the table a little bit. Like we talked about, pretty much WCHA up and down the lineup, if you want to put it that way. Lee Steckline on the back end, Kayla Barnes, Caroline Harvey. What an impressive player she has been. Only 19 years of age on the back end there. One of the youngest players on this team, getting the call, and just one heck of a hockey player. Megan Keller has been a stalwart, 25 years of age and 96. A very impressive career at the University of Minnesota. Megan Bozak fits in that bill. She's 30 now. Abby Ruck, Kelly Panic, Grace Zumwinkle, who we've gotten a chance to see in person plenty of times, and the success she's had at Minnesota. Brianna Decker, who's kind of been a silent driving force as she approaches age 30. Savannah Harmon, Haley Skamura, Jesse Comfer, Jinsey Dunn, of course, 24 years of age, former Ohio State product on this roster, has been impressive. Hannah Brandt, some lady by the name of Hillary Knight. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's going to play forward.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Somebody like that. Danny Cameronese, former Golden Gopher. Alex Carpenter, who is playing actually at KRS right now. Amanda Kessel on the forward end. Abby Murphy to round out the forwards. And then another forward, the captain, some Kendall Coyne Schofield lady.
I don't know. Has she been on TV or something?
I hear she's good at hockey.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the goaltenders, Nicole Hensley, Alex Cavallini, and Maddie Rooney to round out that U.S. roster. Nick, this kind of always goes back to who makes the roster, who are some of the best players in the U.S., obviously. What do you think of the roster? Do you feel that this team has a serious competitive edge to really hang with Canada and what they've got going? It's very WCHA heavy. It's very Minnesota hockey heavy, especially Golden Gopher heavy as far as, where players have played. I like the mix. I think there's a lot of veteran experience, but I also think there's a lot of young speed and skill and new talent. We're familiar with our Kendall Coynes, we're familiar with our Hillary Knights, our Jinsey Dunns, but I feel like that some of these younger players they just continue to get better and better.
Yeah, I mean that's the key recipe, right? Is you want that mix of those stalwarts that have had that experience, right? Who aren't rattled by certain situations on the ice or things out of their control, right? Then you also have that new talent, that new high-flying offensive talent, right, that we see, and even some on the back end. It's a good mix. Canada's a little bit older, But again, Canada's very experienced, and it's not taken away from the talent they'll put on. Gosh, they're good. So, but at the end of it, it's how you execute, right? At the end of the day, United States and Canada, it's been a bloodbath these last 10 years. To really get the start of it. But I do like the U.S. makeup. Again, very, as you mentioned, WCHA heavy, very Minnesota heavy, as far as, where some of these girls have played or are playing right now. So there's a lot of already some familiarity, which is good. Both, as far as, you're talking about, the miracle of Herb Brooks, right? Yes, some of these guys played together too and had some familiarity, but he had to create chemistry with young kids very quickly. That's in hockey, especially, that's the ultimate, key for success is how can you get everybody on the same page as quickly as you can. And, for US, there seems to be a lot of that already. So that should help. For Canada, of course, we know how well that they're coached and how well that, they grow up playing the same game. So they'll have familiarity as well. But yeah, no, the mix is good. But at the end of it, still got to go out and execute. And I can't wait to see the squad go out there and represent the red, white, and blue very well.
Yeah, kind of taking a look at the rosters here. Let's see, 4. 5. 5 players for the United States that are under 24 years of age. Compare that to 3 for Canada here. And of course, all 3 that are on the Canadian roster: Sarah Fillier, Ash Bell, who of course plays for Duluth, and then going down the last one, I just had Emma Malte, who's been an absolute stud for Ohio State in her career with the Buckeyes, rounding out the younger groups for Canada. So like you mentioned, a little bit more veteran experience. Same recipe that's kind of been on the men's side for the Canadian roster as well too. So it should be a good one. I mean, what a fantastic opportunity. Could you imagine being, Ashton Bell or Emma Malte and knowing that you're going to represent Canada on the biggest stage? It's just an incredible experience. So Nick, if it comes down to the wire, oh, by the way, I was also going to say, how about the fact that in 2018, the actual leaner for the tournament was Alina Mueller, Northeastern Huskies on the Swiss team that actually paced the tournament with 10 points. So again, I think that Swiss team is still a dark horse as well too. But let's say everything goes the way that U.S. and Canadian fans hope. You get the showdown in the gold medal game, the rematch. What's your prediction? If that happens, does the U.S. take gold or does Canada find redemption for 2018?
Oof. I want U.S. to win it twice in a row.
Okay.
And I think they have a good chance to do it. Again, it's going to be a 1-goal game. And to me, it's probably going to have overtime or at least, third period, just, nail biting action as it usually has been between these two clubs. But I think the U.S. has a really good opportunity to take it twice in a row from the, for the Olympic gold. And I think they will do it.
You know what, Nick? I'm not going to argue with that. I like it. As long as they keep Canada.
That's a first.
As long as they keep Canada to 3 goals or less, right?
Oh, jeez.
Anyway,
you and the 3 goals.
Yeah, it's always been a recipe for success. The less goals you allow, the better of a chance you have to win a game. Did you know that?
The problem is if you keep them to 3 or less, you got to score at least 4.
Yeah, well.
And the Huskies only scored 1 on Friday. They didn't hold them to 3.
I'm just saying it's better than giving up 4 and having to score 5.
Well, it's still an uphill battle either way you slice it. The math is still not in your favor there, Chief.
Listen, I get that your favorite part of last weekend was the face-offs. I understand that. It's fine. It's okay. Anyway, yes, Huskies fans, hang in there. It should be good. Like we mentioned, St. Cloud State, the men's team, back on the docket against Denver this weekend. Women's hockey is battling against Duluth on that Tuesday, and I want to make sure that I get this right and see who they have coming up after that. So I'm just pulling up the schedule here now. So it is St. Thomas that they're going to have for a home and home. So they'll be at home February 1st and February 5th. It's actually a Saturday-Sunday matchup for the women's team on that St. Thomas. So on Saturday, they'll be at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, 2 o'clock that game. And then February 6th, 2 o'clock in Mendota Heights at St. Thomas there. 3 o'clock start on the upcoming Tuesday against Minnesota Duluth. So if you're hanging out, you get out of work a little bit early in the Granite City on Tuesday, go check out the women's team at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center playing the Duluth Bulldogs. Nick, do we have anything else to add for episode 97? Anything you're just burning and dying to get off your chest here?
Nah. I think
sure?
we covered it. Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't want to rant about anything?
No, I saved that for you.
Not that I've ever ranted before, right?
When do you not rant?
I promise I love the game of hockey, and I love all of our fans, and I love all of our listeners, and we hope that you're going to join us soon. Of course, episode number 98 coming out next Sunday, and we will see you soon here in the den.
One-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.